Okay, so next we're going to look at ECS task definitions. So what is a task definition? Well, it's basically a definition, it's metadata, okay? And it's in JSON form, so it's a JSON document, and it will tell ECS how to run a Docker container. So it won't run it, but will tell you how to run it, and that's a definition in JSON form. Okay, so what is included in a task definition? Well, there's some crucial information in it, such as the image name, the port binding for the container and the host. I'll show you what it means in a second. The memory and CPU that are required, the environment variables, networking information, and so on. There's a lot of information you can include in there. So let's have a look at our EC2 instance. Right now it's running the ECS agent, so I'm just putting it there just for information. And we're going to run a HTTPD, it's an Apache server and in a Docker container, and we'll pull that from Docker Hub. And so the important thing is that that Docker Hub, that Docker image is created such as inside the container, the port 80 represents the Apache server. But on our host, we're going to map it to a host port of 8080, and it's just an arbitrary number, okay? So basically, what do we do this? Well, when some traffic comes from the internet into our EC2 instance on port 8080, then automatically Docker is really smart and will map that port 8080 to the port 80 within our Apache container, and we'll be directly talking to Apache. Okay, enough theory, let's go to the practice. Okay, so let's go back to ECS. And in ECS, we have our cluster with one instance. We're going to create a task definition. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to click on task definition. Create new task definition. And here we go again, where ask whether or not we want Fargate or EC2. We'll use EC2 for now. Fargate will come a little bit later. Okay, next step. The task definition name, I'll call it my HTTPD. Okay, and this is just whatever you want it to be. Requires compatibility is EC2. This is because we choose EC2, but we could be Fargate as well. And the task role is an optional IAM role that task can use. So really important, the task that we assign, they can have an IAM role. And that's a question they will ask you at the exam. If a task cannot do anything, it cannot pull an image from the ECR, it cannot talk to S3 or whatever. If a container can't do this, well, it's because it's missing a task role. So we could assign a role. Right now there's none because we need to create a task role, and we don't need to have a task role right now, but just so you know, the option is here and it's really important. Network mode, choose default, leave it as default, and this will basically be bridge on Linux and NAT on Windows. So leave it as default. This is how you get better compatibility. The task execution role is basically a role that is created to be allow ECS to basically create that task. So we'll just leave this as is. It's just an information. And here we get to choose the task memory and CPU. So if you do remember, when we went into ECS, so let's go back into ECS very quickly, and we went to a cluster demo, and we looked at our ECS instance. This EC2 instance, the T2 Micro, had 1024 CPU available and 985 memory available. So when we go here in the bottom, we're going to reserve some of that memory. So maybe we want to reserve 300 megabytes of memory, and for CPU, 250. And this is arbitrary. Don't worry about how do we choose this right now. It's just for the sake of the example. The exam will not ask you about it. So just trust me on this, okay? Okay, so this is how much memory and RAM will be assigned to our task. Then we're going to add a container definition. So I'll click on add container. And this is what container do we want to run. So it's going to be HTTPD. And now we have to choose the image. So let's go to Docker Hub one more time and go to Docker Hub because we're going to pull this from Docker Hub for now. And I'll just type HTTPD. As we can see, this is the Apache HTTP server project, and this is the image we're going to use. So there is a bunch of tags and Docker file we can use, but the idea is that the name is HTTPD. And if we look at tags, we're going to use a tag such as 2.4 right here. This is a good tag to keep things stable. So let's go back to ECS, and we're going to say image is HTTPD. The tag goes after the 2 colon, and we're saying 2.4. Now this is enough, and basically Docker knows that whenever you specify an image like this, the image name and a tag, and that means that it comes directly from the Docker Hub. Okay, we're now going to take this line, and then the memory, we're going to add a hard limit, so we'll choose 300, we'll do the exact same thing. And we could add a soft limit if we wanted to, but I won't need it. Okay, now port mapping is really important. This is where we map, if you remember my diagram, the port of the container to the port of the host. So on the host, we said port 8080, that's where the traffic is going to go through. And for the container itself, well, if we look at the Docker Hub, what does it say in the description? If we scroll down, basically, you'll see that here, port 80 is what's being exposed within the container. So basically, we're going to map port 8080 to port 80 within the container. So let's do this right now. We're going to go back to ECS and container port, I'll choose port 80. Okay, if you're a bit lost, don't worry, just keep on going. Now, for advanced container configuration, we won't do anything. And for environment, we won't do anything as well. We don't need to have all these things. And network setting, those are really advanced. But all that you can see here is that there are a lot of options in here to just basically configure your task definition the way you want. Okay, click on add. And here we go. We have HTTPD running from this image, which has 300 RAM. And we didn't even need to specify the CPU units in this. Okay, this is enough. Now we could add volumes, basically if we wanted to map some EBS volumes, but for now we're not going to do this. And we're good. Now we click on create, and our first task definition has been created. As we can see, it's called my HTTPD, and the tag is 1. So it's the first version of this task definition. If we scroll down, we get basically a UI of everything that happened. And if we go to JSON, we get the JSON form of this task definition. So the important thing to note here is that port mapping, we map the host port of 8080 to the container port of 80. And then the memory is 300, that kind of stuff, and the image is HTTPD 2.4. Okay, that's enough. So we have created a task definition, but now we're going to need to run this task definition, and I will do this in the next lecture.